So it's a video about John McCain, his life, his death, why he was the way he was, why he looked the way he looked. He was a remarkable man, and I discuss his chart in this video. You'll also see some very precise astrological methods. So I'm making this video about John McCain, the American senator who just passed away on August 25th, 2018 at 4:28 local time in his home, Sedona, Arizona. So we have accurate times for these things. It's a quick case study. I'm going to look at his chart. We also have a good birth time for John McCain. First, I just want to say, of course, condolences to his family and whatnot. Never like to discuss someone's death in any kind of exploitive way, of course. John McCain lived a long and prosperous life, and he's being regaled as an American hero and things like that. For sure, he served his country in the military, and then as a congressman and then senator for 5 decades or something, back into the mid-60s when he was in the military, and then as a senator from the early 80s, or as a congressman and then senator. So look at his chart here. It's funny because he's kind of like Saturn incarnate. There's a couple things about him that really show this Saturn nature. First of all, of course he was old. He was 81 years old, but John McCain has seemed to me like he's been 81 years old for about 20 years. I mean, he's always seemed to be really old. He's not, but he looked old because he had white hair, gray hair. I don't know if it's blonde or gray or whatever it is, but since he's been in the Senate, he's always seemed to me like he's been 60 or 70 years old. I remember him back in the mid-'80s, and then the '90s, he came to prominence as a senator and in the Keating scandal, the banking, the savings and loan scandal, which I remember. I've been watching politics and following it closely since the mid-'80s, and I remember the late '80s, the Keating scandal, Keating 5. He looked like he was 60 or 70 then. He was probably only in his mid-50s because he had white hair or gray hair. Anyway, but Saturn gives that appearance of looking old. He's always looked, and he's always had a stiff, rigid body and this kind of mechanical way of moving, much of it because of what happened when he was a prisoner of war at the so-called Hanoi Hilton when he was captured in the Vietnam War. So he's always moved his arms very stiffly because both of his arms were broken and he can't lift them above his head, actually. Again, this is also very Saturnian. Saturn gives us the capacity to endure hardship and handle it and grow in humility and service and be humbled by the pain and shortcomings of life, but also the capacity to endure it. This man was a prisoner of war for 5 years, being tortured, beaten, hung by his arms for hours where his arms became dislocated from their sockets, all kinds of crazy tortures. Solitary confinement, the kind that would drive people insane. He kept his sanity and he endured it. This is one of the extreme lessons of Saturn, of course. We talk about hardship. This man knew hardship, like most will never know hardship. And he endured it, and he grew in humility. Of course, after you go through something like that, you have a lot of not just humility, but appreciation for life, not wanting to waste any time, not wanting to waste any more of your time. And even though I don't agree with hardly anything politically with John McCain, his politics in general, he was very conservative, a war hawk. He never found a war he didn't like, and other things. Great respect for him as a person. He had a great sense of humor, sort of wry sense of humor, and you can't take away from the man what he did, particularly enduring something like that. He also really carried himself with a certain amount of dignity. When our current president began his campaign to be president in mid-2015, he actually attacked John McCain and said, I like war heroes who weren't captured. I'm not going to get into that, but John McCain, he didn't appreciate it, but he actually, throughout the campaign, as soon as, you know, Trump became the nominee, McCain said, "Yeah, I mean, I support him. This is the will of the people." But then he actually withdrew the support when certain scandals came, and McCain was a voice of, he really pushed back against Trump's outlandish, statements and calling the press enemy of the people and all other kinds of stuff. John McCain really stood up against that. He was always, ready to stand against what he thought wasn't right. But so he has this Aquarius ascendant, so it's a very unique kind of, he's really an embodiment of that Aquarius energy, independent. The word you hear is maverick, maverick, maverick. That could really be the Aquarius label, in particular, Shatabishak Nakshatra. I've been talking a lot about this nakshatra because we had the new moon in Shatabishak Nakshatra. I'm sorry, the full moon. We had the recent full moon in Shatabishak Nakshatra, and that's his birth nakshatra, which, as I've said recently, that's really the nakshatra of that eccentric Aquarius energy, which takes the hard-worn lessons of life, those lessons that humble us, and we reckon with our mortality, and we become internally strong. Once we do that, then we want to show up and make the world a better place, and we start looking for alternative solutions to complicated problems. So as much as McCain was a hardliner in his own way, in certain ways, particularly with the military, he was also very gracious in reaching across the aisle politically, embracing people as diverse as Hillary Clinton, who was a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, at least, one would think that's her sort of label. Ted Kennedy, who was another great sort of democratic icon. John McCain, at great expense to his own political, future or blood or solvency or integrity, would reach across the aisle to prominent senators from the other party in order to get things done, right? And it hurt him when he ran for president because he was, and also many of his Senate races, because they said, well, he's practically a liberal simply because he would work with the other party. He's not practically a liberal, by the way, but this is how polarized politics is in the United States, that just because he wanted to get things done and wanted to include the other party, the extremists in his party would call him like he's a liberal or this sort of thing. But he was always, in that way, a sort of maverick, revolutionary, breaking with convention, breaking with his own party, even up to the end. And that's a sort of Aquarius, especially Shatabishak nature. The other thing just to notice, just to make a note here, is when someone has Saturn in the first house, one of the other ways that he's sort of an embodiment of Saturn, they have very prominent teeth, especially Saturn in the first, because, like, for instance, a skeleton has very prominent teeth, and he had these very prominent teeth, like his lower teeth were very large, and big teeth, prominent teeth, is often shown with Saturn in the first or aspecting the first, by the way. So besides that, he has Saturn in the first house right on the ascendant. So he's, again, the power and embodiment of Saturn energy. He also had a debilitated Mars. This is why he would lash out emotionally and impulsively and fight bad temper, and he would lash out impulsive bad temper. He would lash out impulsively and then apologize later. He's well known for having done that, where he would apologize later for his impulsive emotional outbursts. Very much a debilitated Mars. Sun is powerful here in Leo. He knew about power. He knew how to wield power. He was good with power. We also have this hemming of the sixth house. Hemming is very important when it comes, we have, Ketu, one malefic on the opposite side of the sixth house, and then the sun on the other side of the sixth house. So we have this malefic hemming here on the sixth, which showed the tendency to get, and also of a debilitated Mars, which show the tendency to get into accidents, have health issues, have strong enemies, competitors, battles, and struggles to fight his whole life. He just saw life as a struggle and had to fight with a lot of powerful enemies and competitors. But again, through it all, he wound up persevering. One of the reasons why is because there's also a very gracious aspect onto this onto this Mars. Even though it's debilitated and hemmed in the 6th house, it's aspected by a very gracious Mars. It's aspected by a very gracious Jupiter. See, and it's a very tight degree. Mars is 22, Jupiter's 22, Mars is 19. Sorry for misspeaking here. Jupiter's 22 of Scorpio, Mars is 19 of Scorpio. So, again, you see a lot of the issues of his life that had to do with struggles, fighting, battling, competition, played out here. And, you always hear the same things. He was a maverick, and he was a fighter. Maverick, shut to be shocked. Aquarius with Saturn. Saturn also retrograde in the 1st, right? A lot of that eccentricity of Aquarius, which wants to share and expand and extend beyond what's expected, even if it means reaching across the aisle to break convention with the most liberal senators. Here he is, this hardline war hawk, working with Hillary Clinton, working with Ted Kennedy, bucking his own party. That sort of maverick, and yet always a fighter. Debilitated Mars, hemmed by K2 in the Sun. Many times you can look at planets, the most prominent, powerful, and the weakest, and sort of analyze this as the kind of extremes of the person. He also had a very powerful Mercury. He was very, very smart and practical and down to earth. This is why he wanted to get things done, and he was very practical and very humble because he's got Mercury extremely exalted here in Virgo in the 8th house. Again, this is also tricky, and it shows this awareness of death and this dancing with death a lot in his life. And he died in Mercury Rahu Dasha. He died in Mercury Rahu, as we can see. He started Mercury Rahu in May of 2016. You want to subscribe, but even if you are subscribed, you want to click this little bell that says get notified about every new video. You want to click that, and then you will be notified, and it has the little ringer on after you do that. So make sure to do. We go to the 3rd level. It was Mercury Rahu Moon that ended his life. And again, Mercury it's in the 8th house. And Rahu rules Ardra. Rahu rules K2 in his 5th, and most importantly, his Ascendant. So Mercury Rahu was really a time you're running the dasha of the 8th Lord. It's joined a debilitated Venus. 8th Lord joined debilitated Venus, and Rahu brings in the Ascendant, because the Ascendant is Shatabishak, which is him. Your Ascendant ruler by sign or nakshatra brings in your physical body. It's you, especially your physical body. So Mercury Rahu, he was diagnosed with the cancer, and it took his life. Because Mercury Rahu is a long transit. Is a long cycle. Now when we look at the transits, these are the transits that took his life. This is the moment. We have the actual moment. It was September 25th at 4:28 in Sedona, Arizona, which is where he lived. Again, he's in Mercury Rahu, and what was the 3rd level again? I'm losing my mind. Mercury Rahu Moon, yeah, okay. Moon is also the ruler of that debilitated Mars, and Moon is in the 12th house. So we're just looking at that 3rd level, but usually the 2 levels show it. But look at, again, Mercury Rahu. Look at the transit of Saturn and this Ascendant. This is the moment of death. Saturn retrograde, Ascendant had just passed over it, so that this is like the last hour of his life. The Ascendant was just passing over that natal Saturn, and look at the degrees of Saturn retrograde right over his natal Rahu. So look at this transit. If we move this forward a week, what is this? 26. Yeah, look, 2 weeks. The last. Oh, what's going on here? Oh, I'm going forward. I want to go backwards. Sorry. Okay, that's what I wanted to do. Okay, so yeah, look, Saturn is exact. Okay, so right now, look at this. It's exact. Oh, that's September 1st. Sorry, let me go backward. Okay, this is where it's at. 8:32. So if we go back a little bit more, 8:42, 8:32. This is exact retrograde back 8 minutes 32 seconds when he passed, and it's going retrograde back toward 8 degrees 27 seconds. It's exact. So this time, so it's 8:27. Next week, it'll be 8:26. I mean, this is as exact of a transit as you can get, particularly with Saturn. Saturn is slow, and it's literally within the second of orb in the sky. 8:32, and his natal Rahu is 8:27. Saturn is retrograde right exactly on his natal Rahu, while he's in Mercury Rahu Dasha. It can't be more exact. Now, we also want to look in the Navamsa chart. Look in the Navamsa chart, because Navamsa often shows the life, and it can show the merit in life, the struggles in life, the liberation, and certainly it can show stressful times of death. You know, stressful times, which can also show in the death, because the ninth house shows the merit and the benefit. He's got Saturn Rahu in the sixth house, so he's in Mercury Rahu right now. Mercury is the ruler of Rahu. Mercury is debilitated in the Navamsa, and it's the ruler of Rahu. So again, when you see the Mahadasha planet ruling the Subdasha planet, it's also joined Saturn. Then you know Rahu is going to be a difficult planet for him. We also have the seventh house, which is called a Marika house, hemmed, but he also died in Mercury Rahu Moon. What does the Moon rule in the D9? It rules Cancer, which is hemmed. Moon is also joined Mercury in the D9. You can see these factors lining up in the difficult place. Saturn Rahu is joined Saturn in the sixth. There's this hemming of the seventh house, which is a Marika or death house, and this debilitated Mercury is also joined the Moon. So you can see this difficulty here. Now I want to show you something else about in John Mcain's life. His military service and his unfortunate torture started in 1967. It started in Rahu Venus Dasha. It was Rahu Venus Saturn Dasha when it happened. It was, yeah, okay, there is. It was here. It was in, I think it was October 1967 when this when this began. Yes, it was in October 1967, which was Rahu Venus Sun. Again, let's look at this. It was Rahu Venus Sun. We want to look in the Navamsa. We could also look in the Dasamsha, because that was like his work. His career was in the Navy, I believe, a Navy pilot. Yeah, because he graduated from Annapolis. But we can look in the Navamsa as well, because this shows punya, past life karma, or difficulty, or stress, or merit, or whatever. It was Rahu Mahadasha, Venus Subdasha, Saturn. So look at Rahu and Saturn here. Again, remember, we just saw him pass. We just saw him die in Mercury Rahu. He became prisoner of war 5 years in the, captured by the enemy in Rahu Venus. Now, again, look at Venus. It's in the Ascendant of the Navamsa chart, so it shows it's going to be a very karmic time for him. Rahu Venus. It's in the first house of the Navamsa, which is yourself. It's your identity. It's your body. And this Venus is joined a debilitated Jupiter. So in Rahu Venus, the debilitated Jupiter, the debilitated sense of purpose and mission, and it was influencing Venus, of course. So it was Rahu Venus that he became captured. Again, look at how malefic Rahu is. It's in the 6th house, which joins Saturn, which is also the ruling planet of the Navamsa. Saturn is retrograde. And again, it's tricky whether or not to read retrograde or direct in harmonic charts because they're not astronomical, but anyway, we'll just leave that alone. But it's at least Saturn Rahu conjunction in the 6th house. And again, when you look at the rulers, Rahu, Venus, Saturn, we see that Saturn also, as the 3rd level planet, rules the Ascendant, and Saturn also rules this debilitated Jupiter in the Navamsa. So again, you can see how malefic Rahu is, right? He died in Mercury Rahu Moon. He was captured in Rahu Venus Saturn. And so very interesting life of John McCain. I've sort of known of him my whole life. I've always liked John McCain. I mean, I have nothing but disagreements with his politics. It's kind of like that with every politician. I don't really, when I say I like them, it has nothing to do mostly with their policies and their nature. Politics itself is, all politicians bug the heck out of me for the most part. Obama was a cool guy. He was nice. I disagreed with so much of what Obama did. All of them. They're all politicians. And they take money and they're relatively corrupt, even though they do their best within an extremely corrupt system. So anyway, but McCain was kind of funny. He had this kind of cranky, curmudgeonly nature and sense of humor. He had in his 2000 campaign what was called the Real Talk Express, Straight Talk Express. That's what it was called. So the thing I disliked the most in his whole career, the thing that turned me off the most to him was when it was a very cynical move to select Sarah Palin. It was one of the biggest mistakes I think he made in the 2008 election, the first one against Obama, because he was going to lose, and he decided to take a chance and elect Sarah Palin, who was unqualified to say the least. And it really brought his judgment into question, because especially since he was so old, he was pushing 80, and he'd already been, not pushing 80, but at least in his 70s, and he'd already had a cancer operation. So the possibility that Sarah Palin could be president was real. And I think it definitely scared some people away. Anyway, but I think it was also, besides that opinion, it was a purely cynical pick. There were so many people who were better qualified to be vice president. Sarah Palin was a photogenic, conservative governor from Alaska, and it was a maverick pick. So he was a maverick, and he kept calling her a maverick, and it got really just tired. So he's a politician like everybody, but he also really served his country. Extremely brave man, surviving 5 years being tortured in Vietnam gets my respect and my just, man, that's just pretty amazing that someone could come through that with any semblance of sanity, let alone humility, let alone trying to do the good things that he tried to do, and he did. He was a bulwark of integrity in a place where there's not much of it. And again, I don't agree with most of what he said, but he always had a higher example, even in the midst of the cynicism of politics and whatnot. He seemed to be always, not just marching to the beat of his own drummer, but had a bigger picture in mind. His last return to the Senate was to vote against his party to defeat the bill that would defeat Obamacare. And it was very, very unpopular with our current president. In fact, our current president has refused to say his name or to be gracious since then, because it was very much one of those maverick, against the party line things to do because he didn't think it was the right thing to do. And his final speech on the Senate, he got up and said, we need to go back to regular order, which means passing bills with the consensus of the other side. Now in our Senate and in our House, they never work with the other side. They jam things through, and they only pass things through these narrow majorities, and they never do the thing that Mcain did that tried to build consensus. So he was very much for that regular order. He's one of the last of that old guard that would cooperate with the other side. And he is of another era, and an era that I do remember, as much as politics has always been horrible. I've remembered since the early mid-'80s. It's always been that way, and Republicans and Democrats always fighting. But it is a different time now, where there is zero cooperation anymore. And Mcain is from that time, and even up until the end, he tried to hold true to what he thought was right. And even if I didn't agree with it, you couldn't help but have a grudging respect for him at least, if not a lot of admiration. So I'm showing some, these are some of the advanced techniques that I show of how karmas really ripen, why things happen when they do. So I hope you enjoyed this case study, and may the soul of John Mcain rest in peace, his family be at peace.